My name is Stephanie Harrison, and at 32, I never imagined my life would turn out this way. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Ohio, I worked for everything I had. Then I fell in love with Thomas, whose family vacationed at exclusive resorts and looked down on anyone they considered beneath them. Especially me. His mother Eleanor never missed a chance to remind me I would never truly belong. But everything changed last summer at Sunset Cove Resort. Before I tell you how I ended up owning the very resort my in-laws vacation at every year, drop a comment telling me where you are watching from and subscribe to see more stories about standing up for yourself. I grew up watching my parents work multiple jobs just to keep our family afloat. When it came time for college, I knew my only shot was earning a scholarship. I spent nights studying while my friends were out having fun. The hard work paid off when I received a full academic scholarship to study business at a prestigious university. Even there, I was an outsider among students whose parents had paid their way through life. But I graduated with honors and a burning desire to create something of my own. After college, I started working at a marketing firm while dreaming of launching my own business someday. At 26, I was asked to help cater a charity gala for the firm I worked for. That night changed everything. I was arranging appetizer trays when someone accidentally bumped into me, nearly causing me to drop everything. "I am so sorry," a deep voice said as strong hands steadied my tray. I looked up into the kindest blue eyes I had ever seen. The man was tall, well-dressed, and looking at me with genuine concern. "No harm done," I replied, regaining my composure. "I am Thomas," he said, extending his hand. Thomas Bradford. The Bradford name was well known in business circles. His family owned a chain of luxury hotels across the country. Far out of my league, I thought. "Stephanie," I replied simply. Instead of moving on to mingle with the other wealthy guests, Thomas stayed and talked to me for nearly an hour. He seemed completely uninterested in the glamorous event around us, focusing entirely on our conversation. By the end of the night, he had my number and a promise for coffee the next day. Our romance was unexpected and fast. Thomas was nothing like I imagined a wealthy heir would be. He was humble, kind, and completely unimpressed by material things. He loved that I had worked for everything I had, and he admired my ambition to start my own business someday. "You have more drive in your little finger than most people I know have in their entire bodies," he often told me. 3 months after we met, Thomas proposed. I said yes without hesitation. It was only after the initial excitement wore off that I realized I would be joining his family too. The first meeting with the Bradfords was at their estate for Sunday brunch. I spent hours choosing the perfect outfit, wanting to make a good impression. Thomas assured me they would love me, but I felt the disapproval the moment I walked through their massive front door. Eleanor Bradford, tall and immaculately dressed, assessed me with a cool gaze. "So this is the caterer," she said, not quite making it a question. "Mother, this is Stephanie, my fiancée," Thomas corrected firmly. His father Harold shook my hand warmly enough, but his sister Catherine barely acknowledged me. Throughout brunch, Eleanor asked pointed questions about my family, my education, and my career, each response seeming to disappoint her further. "And what exactly does your father do again?" she asked, though I had already mentioned he was a mechanic. "He owns his own auto repair shop," I answered proudly. "How quaint," she replied, exchanging glances with Catherine. When it came time to plan the wedding, Eleanor immediately took over. Talking about 500 guests, a cathedral ceremony, and a reception at their country club. Actually, I interjected during one planning session. Thomas and I were thinking of something smaller. More intimate. The look Eleanor gave me could have frozen fire. "A Bradford wedding is never small," she stated. But Thomas supported me, and we had the wedding we wanted. 60 guests, an outdoor ceremony by a lake, and a reception that felt personal and warm. Eleanor attended with a tight smile, making it clear she considered the event beneath her family's stature. After the wedding, Thomas and I moved into a beautiful brownstone. His parents had helped with the down payment, a fact Eleanor never let me forget. "At least let me help you decorate," she insisted. "You will need guidance to create a proper home." I thanked her but declined, determined to make our home reflect us, not her tastes. It was the first of many small rebellions that would define my relationship with my mother-in-law. During those early months, I often caught Thomas watching me with concern. "Are you happy?" he would ask. "With you, absolutely," I always answered truthfully. What I didn't say was that his family made me feel like an intruder, someone who had stolen their son rather than loved him. Still, I was determined to prove myself worthy of being a Bradford, even if I had to work twice as hard to do it. 6 months into our marriage, I decided to host a dinner party for Thomas's family. I spent days planning the menu, cleaning our home until it sparkled, and arranging flowers just so. I wanted to show Eleanor that I could be the sophisticated hostess she expected her son's wife to be. The evening started pleasantly enough. Harold complimented our home, and Thomas's brother William brought an expensive bottle of wine. But as the night progressed, the cracks began to show. "The salmon is a bit overdone, dear," Eleanor commented after taking a single bite. "Did you use a recipe?" Before I could answer, she continued, "I must give you my personal chef's contact information. He could teach you the basics." Catherine ran her finger along our bookshelf and frowned at the imaginary dust she pretended to find. "Keeping a home this size clean must be challenging for you," she said with false sympathy. By dessert, I was fighting back tears. As I served the chocolate soufflé I had practiced making 3 times, Eleanor sighed. "In our family, we usually serve something lighter after a full meal. But this is charming in its own way." That night after everyone left, Thomas held me as I finally broke down. "They will never accept me," I sobbed. "They just need time," he assured me. "They do not know you like I do." But I wasn't going to wait for their approval anymore. The next week, I used my savings to rent a small office space and officially launched my business consulting firm, Bradford Business Solutions. I deliberately used the Bradford name, partly because I was proud to be Thomas's wife, but also as a small act of defiance. If they thought I married Thomas for his name, I would wear it proudly and make it my own. The first few months were tough. I worked 14-hour days, took clients others rejected, and built my reputation one successful project at a time. Thomas supported me completely, never complaining when I came home exhausted or when I used our dining room to prepare presentations late into the night. At family gatherings, Eleanor would ask about my little project with the same tone one might use to discuss a child's lemonade stand. Still playing businesswoman, she asked at one dinner, "Thomas, darling, surely you could find her a suitable position at one of your father's companies if she's bored." "Stephanie is not playing at anything, Mother," Thomas replied. "She just landed the Miller account, which your father's firm has been trying to get for years." Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly, but she said nothing more about my business that night. As Christmas approached, Eleanor insisted we spend the holiday at the Bradford estate. "Family tradition," she declared in a tone that allowed no argument. The sprawling mansion was decorated like something from a magazine, with professional touches everywhere. As soon as we arrived, Catherine swept Thomas away to reminisce about childhood memories, while Eleanor turned to me. "Be a dear and help Maria in the kitchen," she said, referring to their housekeeper. "We are short-staffed due to the holiday." I found myself peeling potatoes while the rest of the family enjoyed cocktails by the fire. Maria gave me a sympathetic look. "You know, Mrs. Bradford used to help me when she first married into the family too," she confided quietly. "They tested her the same way." "And did she eventually pass the test?" I asked. Maria smiled sadly. She stopped trying to pass it and started making her own rules instead. When I returned to the living room an hour later, my hands smelling of garlic despite repeated washing, William was in the middle of a story about his college days. "So there was this scholarship girl," he was saying, desperate to fit in with the legacy kids. "Bought fake designer bags, claimed her father was in oil. Pathetic, really." He glanced at me as I entered, and I knew the story was meant as a dig. Thomas looked uncomfortable but said nothing. That night, lying in Thomas's childhood bedroom, I made a decision. I would never win their approval by trying to be what they wanted. Instead, I would succeed on my own terms. The next morning, I called my best friend Michelle. I cannot take another day of this, I told her, stepping outside into the cold garden to ensure privacy. Then do not, Michelle replied simply. You are a Bradford now too. Start acting like it. What do you mean? I mean, stop letting them dictate the terms. Eleanor runs that family because everyone lets her. Including you. Michelle's words stayed with me throughout the remainder of the Christmas holiday. I observed how the family deferred to Eleanor. How she controlled every conversation, every decision. Even Harold, successful businessman that he was, yielded to her at home. I began to push back in small ways. I declined to help with dishes, instead engaging Harold in a conversation about his latest business acquisition. I wore the red dress Eleanor had called attention-seeking to Christmas dinner. I spoke up when William made another classist joke. Thomas noticed the change. You seem different, he said as we packed to leave. I am done trying to be someone I am not, I replied. He smiled and kissed me. Good. I married you, not who my mother wants you to be. But I knew the real test would come during the annual family vacation to Sunset Cove Resort, a tradition the Bradfords had maintained for 20 years. Thomas had already warned me that the vacation was sacred to his mother. Everything had to be perfect, just as it had always been. Little did any of them know, the upcoming vacation would change everything. As our plane descended toward the picturesque coastline where Sunset Cove Resort was nestled, I felt a mixture of excitement and dread. Thomas had described the exclusive resort in glowing terms, a paradise where his family created their happiest memories. You will love it, he promised, squeezing my hand. Private beaches, 5-star restaurants, and the most amazing sunsets you have ever seen. The resort exceeded even my expectations. Perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean, the main building was an architectural masterpiece of glass and stone. Lush gardens surrounded private villas, and everywhere staff moved efficiently to cater to guests' every need. The Bradford family had reserved the same 3 connecting villas they used every year. As we checked in, I noticed how the staff greeted Eleanor by name. Clearly familiar with the family's annual visits. Mrs. Bradford, welcome back, the receptionist said warmly. Your usual accommodations are ready. Eleanor nodded regally, as if accepting her due. We will need extra towels in all bathrooms, the specific pillows I requested, and ensure the kitchens are stocked according to my list. Of course, Mrs. Bradford. Within minutes of arriving at our villa, the power dynamic became clear. Eleanor knocked on our door, barely waiting for a response before entering. Stephanie, be a dear and unpack Thomas's things properly. He never hangs his shirts correctly. She glanced around our stunning accommodation. And once you're settled, we will need someone to make dinner reservations for the week. William suggested you handle that since the rest of us will be enjoying welcome cocktails on the terrace. Before I could respond, she was gone. Thomas emerged from the bathroom, having missed the exchange. Everything okay? He asked. Your mother wants me to make all the dinner reservations while you all have cocktails, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. Thomas frowned slightly. That is just how we do things here. Mom likes to plan everything, but she usually delegates the actual calls. And I am the designated delegate now? He kissed my forehead. Just this once? It would mean a lot to her if things go smoothly this week. I made the reservations, swallowing my pride. But it did not stop there. Throughout the next day, I was tasked with ordering lunch for everyone, finding Catherine's specific sunscreen brand in the resort shop, and retrieving Harold's forgotten book from the villa while everyone else relaxed by the pool. When I finally changed into my swimsuit, a tasteful blue 2-piece, and joined the family poolside, Eleanor looked up from her magazine and frowned. That swimwear seems rather revealing for a family vacation, does it not? She remarked loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. It is a standard swimsuit, Mother, Thomas interjected. Perhaps where Stephanie comes from, Eleanor replied. But we tend to dress more modestly. I looked pointedly at Catherine, whose bikini was considerably more revealing than mine, but said nothing. Instead, I slipped into the pool and swam laps until my frustration subsided. That evening, we dined at the resort's premier restaurant. I had taken extra care with my appearance, wearing an elegant black dress and the pearl earrings Thomas had given me for our anniversary. As we were seated at the best table in the house, I noticed Eleanor inspecting my table setting. "Stephanie," she said as I reached for my water glass, "in finer establishments, we wait for everyone to be served before drinking." I placed the glass down, feeling my cheeks burn. Throughout the meal, she continued her subtle corrections. From the way I held my fork to the amount of wine I accepted. "Small sips, dear. A lady never empties her glass." Later that night, I stepped onto our villa's balcony for fresh air and overheard Eleanor and Catherine talking on the adjoining terrace. "She is trying. I will give her that," Catherine was saying. "Of course she is trying," Eleanor replied. "She hit the jackpot with Thomas. A girl from that background, with no connections or family name. She will play whatever role necessary to secure her position." "Thomas seems truly in love," Catherine said. "Thomas has always had a soft heart. He thinks he is rescuing her from mediocrity. Once the novelty wears off, he will realize his mistake." I slipped back inside, heart pounding. The casual cruelty of her assessment hurt more than all the direct insults combined. The following days fell into a pattern. The family would make plans, assigning me the least desirable tasks. If we went sailing, I was in charge of packing the picnic. If we went shopping, I carried the bags. Always the helper, never fully part of the family. What bothered me most was how they treated the resort staff. Eleanor complained constantly, sending back perfectly prepared meals and demanding room cleanings at inconvenient hours. William openly mocked a waiter's accent, while Catherine snapped her fingers to summon service. On the fourth day, I found myself apologizing to a young server after William berated him for bringing the wrong brand of sparkling water. "I am so sorry about that," I said, slipping him an extra tip. "It is okay, ma'am," he replied quietly. "The Bradford family is well known here." Later, I sought out the resort manager, a professional man named Daniel who always seemed to be overseeing operations. "Your staff is wonderful," I told him sincerely. "This place is magical." Daniel smiled warmly. "Thank you, Mrs. Bradford. We do our best, especially for our long-term guests like your family. They have been coming here a while, I understand?" 20 years, he confirmed. "One of our most loyal client families. They book the same villas every summer, like clockwork." Curiosity got the better of me. "That must be quite an investment over the years." Daniel nodded. "Indeed. The Bradford annual stay is one of our most significant bookings. Nearly $70,000 for their typical 2-week stay." I tried not to show my shock at the figure. "The resort must be quite profitable." A shadow crossed Daniel's face. "It has been, historically. Though between us, the current owner is considering selling. Maintaining this level of luxury requires constant reinvestment." That evening, as Thomas and I dressed for dinner, I found myself looking at the resort with new eyes. Not just as a guest, but as someone with a business background. "You seem thoughtful," Thomas observed as he adjusted his tie. "Just appreciating all this," I replied. "Have you ever thought about how much your family has spent here over 20 years? Thomas shrugged. "Not really. It is tradition." As we headed to dinner, a plan began forming in my mind. It was audacious, possibly foolish, but the seed had been planted. The final straw came during our last dinner of the vacation. Eleanor had been particularly demanding all day, and the staff was visibly strained trying to meet her expectations. "I do not understand. Perhaps they reserve their best service for owners rather than guests," I suggested mildly. Eleanor's laugh was dismissive. "Darling, people like us are guests everywhere because we can afford to be. Owning just ties you down." As we left the next day, I took one last look at Sunset Cove Resort. Eleanor might be content being a guest, but I was beginning to think ownership had its advantages. 2 years passed, and my consulting business flourished beyond my initial hopes. What started as a one-woman operation expanded to a team of 15 talented consultants. We specialized in helping struggling luxury brands reinvent themselves for changing markets, and our reputation for delivering results spread quickly. My success brought a subtle shift in the family dynamic. Harold occasionally asked my opinion on business matters, And even Catherine showed a grudging respect for my work ethic. Only Eleanor remained unmoved, treating my career as an amusing hobby that Thomas indulged. "How's your little company?" she would ask at family gatherings. "Still keeping you busy?" The condescension no longer bothered me as it once had. I had proven myself, if not to her, then to myself and to the business world that mattered. One Thursday afternoon, my business partner Rachel burst into my office with unusual excitement. "You will never believe what just crossed my desk," she said, placing a folder before me. "Sunset Cove Resort is officially for sale." My heart skipped. "The one in California? Where Thomas's family vacations?" Rachel nodded. "The very same. The current owner is retiring and looking for a buyer who will preserve the resort's character rather than turn it into a commercial chain property." I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was a comprehensive prospectus detailing the resort's financials, property assets, and growth potential. The asking price made me catch my breath, $15 million. But as I studied the numbers, I realized it was actually undervalued given the prime location and loyal clientele. "This could be an incredible opportunity," Rachel said. "Luxury resorts with this kind of reputation rarely come on the market." After she left, I sat staring at the prospectus for hours. Purchasing Sunset Cove would require every bit of business acumen I possessed, not to mention financial resources far beyond my current means. Yet something about the idea felt right, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. That evening, I called Michelle, who had become a successful venture capitalist since our college days. "I need your honest opinion on something potentially crazy," I said after swearing her to secrecy. I outlined my nascent plan to acquire Sunset Cove Resort, explaining the personal significance as well as the business potential. "Let me get this straight," Michelle said when I finished. "You want to secretly buy the resort where your in-laws vacation every year, the place where they have treated you like staff rather than family, and not tell anyone until they are actually there as guests?" "Yes," I admitted. "Ridiculous, right?" "Actually," Michelle replied slowly, "it is kind of brilliant. The resort has solid financials. You have proven yourself in the luxury market space, and the personal satisfaction would be significant. But the price tag is way beyond me." "Not necessarily. Your company is valued at what now? And you have investors who trust your judgment. Plus, I might know some people who would be interested in a venture like this." Over the next month, I immersed myself in research. I studied everything about Sunset Cove, from occupancy rates to staff retention, customer reviews to maintenance costs. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that this was not just a personal vendetta, but a sound business decision. I created a detailed business plan projecting 5-year growth, identifying areas for improvement, and outlining a vision for updating the resort while maintaining its exclusive character. When I felt the plan was solid, I scheduled a meeting with potential investors, including Michelle. The meeting took place in a private dining room at an upscale restaurant. 5 potential investors listened as I presented my vision for Sunset Cove. I was meticulous, addressing every concern before it could be raised, demonstrating my understanding of the luxury resort market, and showing how my company's expertise could elevate the property further. "The current profit margins are respectable," I concluded, "but with targeted improvements and expanded offerings, we could increase revenue by 30% within 3 years." When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Michelle spoke. "I am in for $2 million, she said simply. One by one, the others committed as well. By the end of dinner, I had secured commitments for 60% of the purchase price. The remaining 40% would come from business loans and my own investment. I hired Timothy Anderson, a discreet attorney specializing in luxury property acquisitions, to handle the negotiations. To maintain secrecy, we created a holding company, SCR Ventures, with me as the majority shareholder but not the public face. The current owner has multiple offers, Timothy informed me after initial discussions. But he is intrigued by your vision for preserving the resort's character. He built this place 30 years ago, and it matters to him what happens to it." The negotiations were intense and complex. There were moments when I nearly walked away, particularly when a competing hotel chain increased their offer. But my passion for the project and clear vision for the resort's future ultimately won over the owner. 3 months after seeing the prospectus, I signed the final papers making me the new owner of Sunset Cove Resort. The transaction was structured to complete 1 month before the Bradford family's annual vacation, giving me time to make subtle improvements, but not enough time for news of the ownership change to reach them. Throughout the entire process, I kept the purchase secret from Thomas. This was not just about surprising my in-laws, it was about proving to myself that I could achieve something of this magnitude independently. Thomas believed I was working on a major client project requiring unusual hours and frequent travel, which was partially true as I visited the resort several times to meet with management. "You work too hard," he told me one night as I slipped into bed after midnight. "Just a few more weeks and this project will be complete," I promised. "Mom called today," he mentioned casually, "confirming our villas for the annual trip. She asked if your work would allow you to join for the full 2 weeks this year." The implication that my career was optional, something to be set aside for family traditions, would have infuriated me once. Now I just smiled. I would not miss it for the world. As the vacation approached, I worked with Daniel, who would stay on as resort manager to prepare for the Bradford family's arrival. He was surprised but supportive when I revealed my identity as the new owner. "Your vision for Sunset Cove aligns with what made this place special from the beginning," he said. "And I must admit, I am looking forward to the moment of revelation." We agreed that staff would treat me normally upon arrival, with only a select few knowing my true position. I made subtle improvements to the property, refurbishing the restaurants, updating technology in the villas, and enhancing the spa facilities. Each change was noticeable enough to improve the experience, but not so dramatic as to immediately signal new ownership. The night before our departure, I lay awake beside Thomas, heart racing with anticipation. After years of feeling like an outsider in his family, I was about to change the dynamic forever. But beneath the satisfaction was a twinge of anxiety. Would this grand gesture heal the rift with my in-laws, or deepen it irrevocably? Either way, there was no turning back now. The journey to Sunset Cove Resort felt surreal. Sitting beside Thomas on the plane, watching his family engage in their usual pre-vacation rituals, I wondered how different the return trip would be. Eleanor spent the flight reviewing her detailed itinerary for the vacation, occasionally passing notes to Catherine about planned activities. William boasted about a golf game he had arranged with a senator who was rumored to be staying at the resort. Through it all, I maintained a calm exterior while my thoughts raced ahead to what was coming. As our car approached the resort entrance, I felt a flutter of pride seeing the subtle improvements already visible in the landscaping and refreshed exterior. The sign announcing Sunset Cove Resort had been tastefully updated with a new logo I had personally approved. "Did they change the sign?" Catherine asked as we pulled into the circular drive. "Looks the same to me," Thomas replied, not noticing the difference. The welcoming committee was waiting as our cars stopped at the entrance. Daniel stood at the forefront with several staff members, all wearing new uniforms that reflected the resort's updated branding. "Welcome back to Sunset Cove Resort," Daniel greeted us warmly. His eyes met mine briefly with a hint of conspiracy before returning to Eleanor. "Mrs. Bradford, we are delighted to have your family with us again." Eleanor nodded regally. "I trust our usual accommodations are prepared exactly as requested?" "Of course," Daniel assured her. "And we have some exciting new amenities this year I think you will enjoy." As we checked in, I noticed small changes that only I would recognize as the new owner, from the redesigned key cards to the premium welcome baskets in each villa. The staff maintained their professional demeanor, giving no indication of my connection to the property. Once settled in our villa, Thomas commented on the upgrades. "The place looks even better than last year. New furniture, better tech setup. I wonder if they got a renovation budget approved." "Something like that," I replied with a small smile. The pattern from previous years quickly reasserted itself. Within hours of arrival, Eleanor had assigned me various tasks, from confirming spa appointments to picking up shopping items from the resort boutique. I complied without complaint, knowing the dynamic would soon change dramatically. During a family lunch on the terrace, I noticed several staff members providing particularly attentive service to our table. Eleanor, of course, took this as her due. At least they recognize returning guests, she commented. Though the chef has changed the menu too much for my taste. I find the new offerings refreshing, I ventured. The farm-to-table approach showcases local ingredients beautifully. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Since when are you a culinary expert? I appreciate good food, I replied evenly. And good business decisions. Sourcing locally reduces costs while improving quality. William snorted. Listen to her, mother. A few successful clients and suddenly she is running the place. If only he knew how accurate his mockery was. The tension built gradually over the next 3 days. I noticed Eleanor growing increasingly frustrated that her usual complaints were being addressed with unprecedented speed and courtesy. When she criticized the temperature of the pool, it was adjusted within the hour. When she mentioned preferring a different brand of toiletries, they appeared in her villa before dinner. The service has certainly improved. Harold noted approvingly at breakfast on the 4th day. I suppose, Eleanor conceded reluctantly, though I still think the new management lacks the personal touch of previous years. I bit my tongue, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the truth. That evening was the formal dinner that traditionally marked the midpoint of the Bradford vacation. Everyone dressed elegantly for the occasion, gathering at the resort's signature restaurant, which I had recently renovated with a spectacular ocean view and updated menu. The maitre d' greeted us with exceptional courtesy, leading us to the best table in the house. We have prepared a special menu for your party this evening, he informed us. With compliments from management. Eleanor looked pleased by this special treatment. Well, perhaps they do still value loyal customers. The dinner began splendidly. Course after course of exquisite food arrived, each presentation more impressive than the last. The wine pairings were perfect, and even William found nothing to criticize. As the main course concluded, I excused myself briefly, ostensibly to visit the restroom. Instead, I slipped into the kitchen to check that everything was prepared for the pivotal moment. Is everything ready? I asked the executive chef, whom I had personally hired a month earlier. Yes, Mrs. Bradford, he confirmed. The special dessert and the salad course you requested are prepared exactly as discussed. I returned to the table just as servers appeared with a palate-cleansing salad course. This addition to the meal was my innovation, a light refreshment before the dessert. I personally took the salad bowl from the server, an action that immediately drew Eleanor's attention. Stephanie, what are you doing? She asked sharply. Just helping, I replied calmly, beginning to serve the salad to each family member. Eleanor's face tightened with disapproval. As I placed a serving on my own plate and sat down to join them, she could no longer contain herself. The help does not eat with family, she said coldly. The table fell silent. Thomas looked horrified, Catherine froze with her fork midway to her mouth, and even William seemed uncomfortable with the baldness of the statement. Mother, Thomas finally managed. His face flushed with anger and embarrassment. But before he could continue, I placed my napkin deliberately on the table and looked Eleanor directly in the eyes. I own this entire resort, I said. My voice steady and clear. The silence that followed was absolute. Eleanor's face went through a remarkable series of expressions, from dismissive disbelief to dawning shock. What did you just say? She finally managed. I said, I own Sunset Cove Resort. All of it. The villas, the restaurants, the beach, the golf course. Everything. Thomas turned to me, confusion written across his features. Stephanie, what are you talking about? Daniel, who had been waiting nearby for this moment, stepped forward. It is true, Mr. Bradford. Mrs. Stephanie Bradford is the new owner of Sunset Cove Resort. The acquisition was completed last month. Harold was the first to recover. You purchased this entire property? How's that possible? With careful planning, strong investors, and a solid business proposal, I replied. The same way any significant business transaction happens. Eleanor's shock was hardening into something else now, a mixture of disbelief and anger. This is absurd. Some kind of joke. Not a joke, Mrs. Bradford, Daniel confirmed. Your daughter-in-law now owns one of the premier luxury resorts on the coast. And may I say, her vision for the property has already begun to enhance the experience for all our guests. Catherine looked between me and her mother, seemingly unsure whether to be impressed or appalled. William stared open-mouthed, his usual smugness entirely absent. Thomas reached for my hand under the table. "Why did you not tell me?" he asked quietly. "I needed to do this myself," I replied just as softly. "Can you understand that?" Before he could answer, Eleanor pushed back from the table. "I need some air," she announced stiffly, rising to her feet. As she walked away, the remaining Bradfords sat in stunned silence. Then Harold began to laugh. A genuine, appreciative laugh that broke the tension. "Well played," he said, raising his wine glass in my direction. "Extraordinarily well played." The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of questions, explanations, and gradually adjusting to the new reality. Thomas, after his initial surprise, showed a mixture of pride and hurt. "I would have supported you," he said as we walked back to our villa later that night. "I know you would have," I replied. "But can you see why I needed to do this independently? Your family has always seen me as an accessory to you, someone who married into success rather than creating it." He was quiet for a long moment. "I understand. I just wish I could have been part of it." "You are part of it now," I assured him. "And there is so much more I want to do with this place." As we reached our villa, Thomas paused. "What about my mother? This will not be easy for her to accept." "No," I agreed. "But maybe it is time for things to change between us." Indeed, the confrontation with Eleanor was far from over. The grand revelation at dinner was merely the opening act in what would prove to be a complex renegotiation of our relationship. The morning after my revelation dawned bright and clear, but the atmosphere at breakfast was anything but sunny. I had arranged for a private family breakfast on the terrace of the main restaurant, anticipating that the Bradfords would prefer privacy while processing the new situation. Eleanor arrived last, her composure firmly back in place. She greeted everyone with a tight smile, making no reference to the previous evening's drama. Taking her seat, she unfolded her napkin with practiced precision and summoned a waiter with a subtle gesture. "I will have the egg white omelet with spinach," she ordered. "And proper tea, not the bags you served yesterday." I caught Daniel's eye across the restaurant and gave a small nod. Within minutes, Eleanor's breakfast arrived exactly as specified, along with a pot of premium loose-leaf tea. "The kitchen seems more efficient today," she remarked to no one in particular. "It should be," Catherine replied, unable to resist. "Considering who owns it now." Eleanor shot her daughter a warning look, but said nothing. William, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly leaned toward me. "Stephanie, I have been thinking. The spa facilities here are excellent, but could be expanded. I happen to know several investors who specialize in luxury wellness centers." "Are you actually pitching business ideas to Stephanie?" Thomas asked incredulously. William shrugged. "Why not? She has clearly demonstrated business acumen. I am simply recognizing an opportunity." "How very convenient that you suddenly respect my wife's abilities," Thomas said dryly. "Now boys," Harold interjected, "this is still a family vacation. Let us enjoy it without squabbling." Throughout breakfast, I could feel Eleanor watching me, reassessing everything she thought she knew about her son's wife. I maintained a calm demeanor, neither gloating nor apologizing for my success. After the meal, as everyone dispersed for morning activities, Eleanor approached me directly. "I wonder if we might speak privately," she said formally. We walked together to a secluded seating area overlooking the ocean. For several minutes, neither of us spoke, simply watching the waves break against the shore below. "How did you do it?" Eleanor finally asked. "Truly, the resort must have cost millions." 15 million, I confirmed. "I secured investors, took out business loans, and invested a significant portion of my company's profits." "All without Thomas knowing?" "Yes." Eleanor's expression was difficult to read. "Why? Was it just to make a point to me?" I considered my answer carefully. "That was part of it," I admitted. "But only part. The resort is also a sound business investment with excellent growth potential. And yes, There is a certain satisfaction in owning a place where I was made to feel I did not belong. I never intended. Eleanor began, then stopped herself. That is not entirely true. I did not welcome you as I should have. This admission, small as it was, surprised me. May I ask why? I pressed gently. Eleanor sighed, suddenly looking older than her years. When Thomas brought you home, I saw a young woman much like I had once been. Ambitious, intelligent, from a background that society deems insufficient. You. I could not hide my surprise. But the Bradford name was my husband's, not mine, she finished. My father owned a small grocery store. I put myself through college on scholarships and worked as a receptionist at Bradford hotels, where I met Harold. This revelation stunned me into silence. Eleanor had always seemed the epitome of old money elegance. Harold's family was not particularly welcoming, she continued. I spent years proving myself, changing how I spoke, dressed, behaved. I suppose when Thomas married you, I saw history repeating itself, and She paused. I became the very thing I had once despised. Why did you never tell me this? Pride, she admitted. And perhaps fear that acknowledging our similarities would somehow diminish what I had accomplished. This moment of vulnerability from Eleanor was more shocking than any luxury resort purchase could ever be. For the first time, I saw her not as an imperious mother-in-law, but as a woman who had fought her own battles long before mine. This does not excuse how I have treated you, she added, straightening her shoulders. But perhaps it explains it somewhat. Perhaps, I agreed. As we returned to the main resort area, I noticed subtle changes in how the family interacted with the staff. William, who had previously barely acknowledged servers, now made eye contact and offered thanks. Catherine asked a housekeeper's name rather than simply making demands. Thomas sought me out by the pool later that morning. You have created quite the stir, he observed, sitting beside me. Are you angry? I asked directly. Surprised, definitely. A little hurt you kept it secret. But angry? He considered the question. No. Watching my mother recalibrate her entire understanding of you has been illuminating. She told me about her background, I shared. How similar it was to mine. Thomas nodded. Dad told me those stories years ago. Mom never talks about it. The fact that she shared that with you is significant. That afternoon, I met with Daniel to discuss operations, no longer needing to hide my ownership role. As we walked the property, Thomas joined us, asking intelligent questions about the business aspects of running a luxury resort. You have a good eye for this, Daniel told him. Perhaps you inherited more of your father's business sense than you realized. The remainder of the vacation proceeded with a new dynamic. I was no longer assigned menial tasks or excluded from activities. Instead, I found myself in the unexpected position of hostess, ensuring all family members enjoyed their stay. Even more surprising was watching the Bradfords interact differently with the resort staff. Eleanor still had high expectations, but her demands came with please and thank you now. William actually apologized to a waiter he had previously mocked. One evening, I found Catherine alone on the beach, watching the sunset. May I join you? I asked. She nodded, making room on the sand beside her. This is still surreal, she admitted. My brother's wife owns our vacation spot. Life takes unexpected turns, I agreed. I want to apologize, Catherine said suddenly. I followed Mother's lead in how I treated you, which was wrong. Thank you for saying that. The truth is, she continued, I have always been a bit envious of your independence. Your willingness to build something of your own. It is never too late to start, I told her. You have a good mind for business, Catherine. I have heard you discussing investment strategies with your father. She looked surprised by the compliment. Really? I always thought that was just my attempt to get Daddy's attention. Maybe it started that way, but you have good instincts. If you ever want to explore options beyond the family business, I would be happy to help. Catherine seemed genuinely touched by the offer. I might take you up on that. By the final days of the vacation, a new normal had established itself. Not perfect harmony, but a mutual respect that had never existed before. Thomas and I spent more time with his family than in previous years, but now the interactions were largely pleasant rather than stressful. The night before our departure, Harold requested a private dinner with just Thomas and me. "I want to acknowledge what you have accomplished here, Stephanie," he said once we were seated. "Not just purchasing the resort, impressive as that is, but forcing this family to re-examine some long-held assumptions." "That was not my primary goal," I said honestly. "Perhaps not, but it may be your most lasting achievement," Harold replied. "Eleanor and I have been discussing our own behaviors, particularly how we treated you when you joined the family." Thomas reached for my hand under the table, squeezing it gently. "I also want to acknowledge," Harold continued, "that Thomas has chosen a partner who embodies the very qualities that built the Bradford name in the first place. Vision, determination, and the courage to take calculated risks. Coming from my father-in-law, this recognition meant more than I could express." As we prepared to leave Sunset Cove the next day, I realized that the resort represented more than a business acquisition or a statement to my in-laws. It had become a symbol of transformation, both personal and familial. 1 year later, we returned to Sunset Cove Resort for the annual Bradford family vacation. So much had changed in 12 months, it felt like a decade had passed rather than a single year. The resort itself had flourished under my ownership. Occupancy rates were up 20%. And the property had received several prestigious industry awards for its renovations and exceptional service. The changes I had implemented, from sustainable practices to enhanced guest experiences, had paid off both financially and in terms of reputation. But the most profound transformations were within the family itself. As our cars pulled up to the entrance, I felt none of the anxiety that had characterized previous arrivals. Instead, there was a sense of pride and accomplishment as I watched the staff welcome us with genuine warmth. "Welcome home, Mrs. Bradford," Daniel greeted me, having become both a valued employee and a friend over the past year. Eleanor, who had arrived just ahead of us, was already speaking with the concierge. As I approached, I heard her telling him about her recent trip to Italy rather than issuing demands as she once would have. "Stephanie," she acknowledged with a smile that, while not effusive, held genuine welcome. "The entrance landscaping looks particularly beautiful this year." "Thank you," I replied. "We planted native species to reduce water usage while enhancing the aesthetic appeal." "Smart." She nodded approvingly. "Both practical and beautiful." This simple exchange represented monumental progress in our relationship. Over the past year, Eleanor and I had established a cautious rapport, building on the vulnerability she had shown during our previous visit. We would never be best friends, but we had developed a mutual respect that made family gatherings considerably more pleasant. Thomas noticed the interaction and smiled. Our marriage had only strengthened through the challenges of the past year. My business success and independence had not threatened our relationship as Eleanor once predicted, but enhanced it. Thomas had discovered his own entrepreneurial interests, launching a sustainable tourism consulting firm that complemented both his family's hotel business and my ownership of Sunset Cove. "Shall we get settled in our villa?" he suggested, placing an arm around my waist. Our accommodations had been upgraded to the premium oceanfront villa that I had specially redesigned. As owner, I could have claimed it from the beginning, but waiting a year felt right, a symbol of earned rather than demanded privilege. That evening, we gathered for dinner at the resort's new rooftop restaurant, another of my innovations that had proven wildly popular with guests. The circular table offered panoramic views of the ocean, with the famous sunset that gave the resort its name painting the sky in breathtaking oranges and pinks. To family, Harold proposed a toast, raising his glass. And to growth. As we clinked glasses, I reflected on how much had changed. Catherine sat beside me, eagerly discussing the business mentorship program I had established for young women entrepreneurs. She had discovered a passion for sustainable fashion and was launching her own line with my guidance. The investor meeting went better than expected, she shared excitedly. They loved the concept of luxury clothing with full supply chain transparency. "I am not surprised," I told her sincerely. "Your presentation was impeccable." William, too, had undergone a transformation of sorts. After the revelation of my business success, he had been forced to reconsider his dismissive attitude toward those outside his social circle. While still occasionally pompous, he had developed a new awareness of his privilege and was making efforts to use it constructively. "The resort charity program you implemented is impressive," he commented during dinner. "Particularly the hospitality training for underprivileged youth." "Thank you," I replied. "We have already hired 3 graduates from the program, and they are among our most dedicated staff." After dinner, as everyone moved to the lounge area for drinks, Harold drew me aside for a private conversation. "I want you to know how proud I am to call you my daughter-in-law," he said, his usual businesslike demeanor softened by genuine emotion. "That means a great deal coming from you," I responded. "I have been in business for 40 years, he continued, "and I recognize exceptional talent when I see it. What you have accomplished here, not just with the resort but with our family, is remarkable." "I had good material to work with," I said, meaning it. Beneath their initially frosty exterior, the Bradfords were fundamentally decent people who had been constrained by their own expectations and traditions. Later that night, Thomas and I walked along the private beach, the moonlight creating a silver path across the water. "Are you happy?" he asked, echoing the question he had often posed during our early marriage. "Completely," I answered truthfully, though not for the reasons I might have expected. "Meaning?" "A year ago, I thought owning this resort would be about proving something to your family, showing them I belonged. But it turned out to be about proving something to myself instead." "And what was that?" Thomas asked, pulling me closer as we walked. "That I do not need anyone else's approval to determine my worth. That I can create my own place in the world rather than waiting to be invited in." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "I think that is a lesson my family needed to learn as well, especially my mother." Indeed, Eleanor had perhaps changed the most of all. The rigid matriarch who once ruled family gatherings with an iron will had softened, revealing glimpses of the striving young woman she had once been. She still maintained high standards, but her definition of what constituted acceptable had broadened considerably. The following morning, I found her enjoying coffee on her villa's terrace and joined her at her invitation. "I have been thinking about our conversation last year," she said after we had exchanged pleasantries. "About my background and how I treated you." "Yes," I encouraged gently. "When I married Harold, I was so determined to prove myself worthy of the Bradford name that I erased much of who I had been before. I thought that was necessary to belong." She looked out at the ocean, her expression pensive. "Watching you this past year, maintaining your identity while joining our family, has been educational." "It has not always been easy," I admitted. "No," she agreed. "But perhaps the things most worth doing rarely are." The remainder of the vacation unfolded with a comfort and ease that would have been unimaginable 2 years earlier. We engaged in familiar traditions like the family sailing day and formal dinners, but now I participated fully rather than hovering at the edges. I also introduced new elements, including a volunteer day where the entire family helped with a beach conservation project alongside resort staff. Seeing Eleanor in practical clothes collecting trash alongside housekeepers would have been inconceivable before, but she approached the task with unexpected enthusiasm. "Your staff clearly respects you," she commented afterward. "Not just as the owner, but as a person. That is more valuable than any luxury amenity." On our final evening, I hosted a special dinner for both staff and family, deliberately breaking down the barriers that had once seemed so important to the Bradfords. Watching Daniel chat comfortably with Harold about business trends while Thomas and the head chef exchanged cooking tips filled me with quiet satisfaction. This, I realized, was true success. Not the ownership of a luxury property or even financial independence, but creating an environment where people felt valued regardless of their position or background. As I looked around the table at my family, both by blood and by choice, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey from outsider to owner had been challenging and at times painful, but ultimately healing for all involved. I had not just bought a resort, I had helped reshape a family's understanding of worth, belonging, and respect. The wealth that truly mattered wasn't in property or possessions, but in these transformed relationships, built on mutual appreciation rather than obligation or tradition. Life rarely offers perfect resolutions to complex relationships. Eleanor and I would likely always have moments of tension. William would occasionally revert to old habits, and family gatherings would never be entirely free of Bradford drama. But we had found a new foundation, one built on respect rather than resentment. Standing on the balcony of our villa on the last night, watching the famous sunset paint the sky in glorious color, I reflected on how far we had all come. From feeling like a maid in my own family to owning the very ground beneath their feet, my journey had come full circle. But the true victory was not in proving them wrong, but in helping all of us grow into better versions of ourselves. If you have ever felt like an outsider in your own life, remember that belonging is not always about being accepted by others. Sometimes it is about creating your own place in the world and inviting others to join you there on equal terms. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a family situation? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be going through similar struggles. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that your worth is never determined by someone else's perception. It is defined by your own courage, integrity, and heart.